So it's been a little bit since we finally got our first gameplay reveal for Legend Z-A, and since then we have also gotten a couple of other smaller trailers as well. It hasn't been anything crazy, but we have learned some stuff at the same time, and I kind of just wanted to compile all of that into one video and cover everything that we have learned about this game to this point. So in this video, I'm going to be looking at 51 major details in Legend Z-A that you need to know. And this is going to be the kind of stuff that you might have missed or didn't notice or is hiding in plain sight. Not the super obvious marquee stuff, but the stuff in the background that would be important to know, but you just might have missed for whatever reason. So that is what we're going to be getting into in this video, and it's also stuff that I have noticed myself, but I've also seen others in the community point out too. Specifically, these people that you're seeing on screen, I wanted to make sure to shout them out because I saw them point out certain things that I'm going to be mentioning in this video, and I just wanted to make sure everyone got credit, so shout out to these people. I will also link them in the credits link in the description too, so be sure to check them out as well. With that said though, that pretty much covers what we're going to be doing here, so without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. The first thing that I wanted to mention is kind of like a precedent for the rest of the video, and that is the Legends Z-A leaks. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to be going into detail on these leaks, because I don't want to spoil you guys, I don't want to spoil myself, but I felt like in a video like this, I kind of had to acknowledge that they're out there and that they exist. There have been leaks for Megas, there have been leaks for other information, I believe, potentially even concerning the plot, which is really crazy. So if you want to check out that stuff, a quick Google search will probably point you in the right direction. But if you want to stay spoil-free, just remember to be careful out there, especially because it's probably only going to get worse as we get closer to the release of the game. The next thing that I wanted to talk about are knockout catches, and this is something that I believe was in the first gameplay reveal trailer, so it's been out there for a while, but in compiling interesting, just smaller background details, I thought this one was interesting, because we see in the trailer that when you are catching a Pokemon, at least a lot of the time, that you actually knock it out prior to catching it, instead of like normal where you get its health down to a low point, but not to the point where it gets knocked out in order to catch it, because if you do knock it out, then you lose your chance to catch it. So that's going to be an interesting kind of change to the catching formula, and I'm pretty interested to see how it works out and how it potentially increases your chances of actually catching a Pokemon. Another thing that we also saw earlier on is the fact that Mega Evolutions now have a gauge that seems to be charged up when you get in battles and gain experience and that kind of thing, and then when you actually get to use Mega Evolution, this gauge will slowly deplete and will basically determine the amount of time that you are able to stay Mega Evolved before your Pokemon eventually goes back to its original state when the gauge runs out. And this is obviously a significant change, but I am actually interested to see how it's gonna work. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. Obviously, with the combat system being so different, I think it will play in and balance out pretty well with that. So overall, it's gonna be a key thing and interesting to see how it actually works out. A key detail that people have noticed and that has provided a lot of discussion since these trailers started coming out is the fact that the rivals and the player characters are essentially more or less the same people, or at least have the same designs, because if you look closely you can see that they have the exact same hairstyles. The only difference is their color and the fact that the player characters are wearing hats to kind of conceal their hairstyle, and the fact that it is the same as the rivals. It is going to be very interesting to see if this means anything at all, because it is the kind of thing that could have some plot significance, but at the same time, it could just be a character design thing, because as we also know, the player character that you pick determines the rival that you get as well. So because they're connected in that way, it could just sort of be a character design thing that they decided to go for, and might not have plot significance, but nevertheless, it's really interesting and is going to be worth paying attention to. One thing that is a lot easier to miss actually concerns the anime. As we know, the anime tends to parallel the games a lot of the time, and it seems like this could be happening with Pokemon Horizons and Legends Z-A as well. There's a character in Horizons named Gibeon, who was basically the primary antagonist of the first arc of this series, and also, I'm speaking from a limited amount of knowledge on Horizons, so forgive me if I mess something up, but basically, Gibeon is the big bad guy, and he seems to potentially have a parallel with the rivals as well, because his hairstyle, which is like a white color that kind of bleeds into a pink, is essentially identical to what the hairstyle of the rivals are doing. And this is even more interesting considering that there are a lot of parallels with Gibeon to AZ in regards to what he is trying to do and his involvement and plot in the anime, having to do with extending his life and more or less living forever, which is exactly what AZ ended up doing in the background of the plot of Pokemon X and Y, and we also see the rivals having a key connection with AZ in Legends Z-A as well. So all of this stuff definitely could be playing a factor in terms of the significance of this game, and it's going to be really interesting to see how it pans out. By the way, if you're liking this video so far, consider picking up some merch at my merch store to help support the channel. Huge 40-minute videos like this are not exactly the easiest or the cheapest to put together, so any bit of support through picking up a plush or some trading cards helps to keep this content happening and will help to keep the Z-A content rolling along as the game eventually releases. You can hit the link in the description to check that out, and honestly, the merch is a lot of fun too, because it features some of the Fakemon that have appeared in my videos, and it's all really high quality stuff. So yeah, give that a look with the link in the description. Super appreciated. Thank you guys so much for the support. And now, let's get back to Legends Z-A. Another thing that we see in one of the trailers is a shot where Zygarde is sort of looking on at Prism Tower, and this is a very picturesque moment right at the end of one of the trailers, and I feel like it could symbolize something greater. Obviously, with Prism Tower being the central location and the most iconic one in Lumiose City, it is going to play a significant role one way or another, and with Zygarde kind of having this connection to it, I feel like this could be a foreshadow of whatever Prism Tower is doing having something to do directly with Zygarde. Could Zygarde be looking for something that maybe is at Prism Tower? Does it want something that is in Prism Tower or maybe under Prism Tower? I feel like all of these are a possibility because I definitely feel like something could be going on here. And speaking of under Prism Tower, there is a possibility that we could get something that is lying beneath Prism Tower itself. Obviously, it would be a great way to sort of reveal some kind of secret that the tower could have, or something that someone is hiding in the tower. And there's also been a lot of talk of the catacombs of Paris possibly being worked into Lumiose City in this game, and this could be a way that that could be integrated, with Prism Tower being a central location we gotta go, and then it reveals a big secret underneath the very ground of it that is inspired by the catacombs, that has maybe something to do with what Zygarde is after, or just relating to Zygarde in general. So that is something else that could be worth looking out for. I've also been talking about in my Legends Z-A videos how Mega Rayquaza is very likely going to play a factor somehow in this game, just because of how deeply entrenched in the lore of Mega Evolution it is, and because we have an organization, Quasartico Inc., that is basically named after Rayquaza as well, because their names both come from Quasar. Well, this seems to be further cemented in the fact that Vinny, one of Quasartico Inc.'s employees, directly resembles the appearance of Mega Rayquaza specifically, with his lamb chops kinda resembling the quote-unquote lamb chop horn type things that Mega Rayquaza has as well. Plus, he's also got green in his outfit and attire as well, so I think this basically confirms without a shadow of a doubt that Rayquaza is going to be involved somehow, so that's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. One thing that a lot of people have been wondering about with this game is whether we're going to see returning characters or possibly even relatives in the same way that we saw those same things in Legends Arceus. Well, while the jury is still out on that at this point, one character that I believe is very possibly going to make an appearance is Trevor, one of our rivals in Pokemon X and Y. And the reason for this is because he actually lives in Lumiose City, and since this entire game takes place in Lumiose City, and it also takes place in the future compared to Pokemon X and Y, but it doesn't seem like it's too far in the future, there is a very strong possibility, in my opinion, that Trevor could not only make an appearance, but potentially could be a time-skipped version of him where he's several years older. That would be very interesting to see, and it's something that I definitely hope actually happens. Another couple of characters that also reside in Lumiose City that we very possibly could see in this game are Clement and Bonnie. Clement is the gym leader of Lumiose City, and Bonnie is his younger sister, so it seems very possible that they will make an appearance in this title. However, if they do, it possibly could be in a different capacity to the way it was in X and Y, because the Lumiose City gym was the Prism Tower in X and Y, and so far in Legends Z-A, it seems like Prism Tower is no longer a gym, because based on what we can see so far, the gym iconography of Prism Tower that was there in X and Y has been removed. So if we do see Clement and Bonnie in this game, it's possible that we could see them in a different light or in a different capacity. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this whole situation plays out. And speaking of characters from X and Y, it's going to be very interesting to see what the fate of Lysandre ultimately is, because as we know in Pokemon X and Y, his final fate is left up in the air. He basically gets blasted by the ultimate weapon, and that could potentially kill him, or potentially make him like AZ and give him eternal life, essentially, depending on which version of the game you're playing, because those events are a little bit different depending on which version you are going through. However, I feel like this is a very key point in the overarching story of the Kalos region, so I personally hope that it gets addressed. I feel like there's at least a decent chance that it will get addressed, and if it does, it's going to be just really, really interesting to see. And along with the fate of Lysandre, another very interesting element of this game that's going to be worth looking out for is the fate of Team Flare and what happened to them after the events of X and Y. Obviously, with their plans totally failing, they're more than likely going to be disbanded, at least to a degree at this point, but it's also very likely that they will be at least mentioned in this game in some capacity, because I don't necessarily feel like you make a Kalos game without any mention of Team Flare whatsoever, so I feel like they will have some kind of role, and it's going to be really interesting to see what that role actually is. One of the very first of these kind of background details that people started pointing out as these trailers started releasing concerns Chikorita and its potential new evolution. Many people have pointed out at this point that Chikorita has a fairy type move in one of the trailers that it previously has not been able to have, and due to the history of previous Pokemon games also doing the same thing with other starter Pokemon, this could point to Chikorita potentially getting a fairy type evolution or mega evolution. I believe, if the leaks are to be believed, that the answer to this has actually already been revealed, but personally that is where I'm going to leave off, so if you would like to know more, it is out there for you to look up yourself. Another thing that I think could play a key factor in this game are the plazas of Lumiose City. In Pokemon X and Y, and now again in Legends Z-A, Lumiose City is split up into 5 different plazas, which are basically 5 different districts of the city. I feel like this is going to play a key role in the overall operation of the game, and I feel like the districts themselves could have something to do with the overall progression of the game as well. It kind of reminds me of the different areas in Legend Z-A where we went from one to another, and I could see the same sort of thing potentially also being true here as well, where we essentially have to complete all of the tasks in each district of the city as we go forward in the story. So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of relates to the overall progression of the game. Yet another very interesting thing as it relates to Quasartico, who we mentioned earlier, is that it seems that the Quasartico headquarters building seems to be in the same area of Lumiose City as Lysandre Labs was in Pokemon X and Y, which could be a bit of foreshadowing with regards to the overall intentions of this organization. Something else that we get to see in these trailers is the fact that at the start of the game, the player arrives into Lumiose City on a train. And this actually brings to mind one of the key mysteries from Pokemon X and Y, which is at the Lumiose City train station in those games, a mysterious note can be found that says, "I'm going to go for help. Wait in the usual place." However, we don't know anything about what this note was supposed to mean, who wrote it, who it was for, what the context is of it, and no resolution was offered in X and Y itself. With Legend Z-A likely aiming to tie up a lot of the loose ends and unsolved mystery type of things from X and Y that the original games didn't get a chance to resolve, it is possible that this will be addressed as well, and seeing the very same Lumiose train station at the beginning of the game makes me wonder about whether we will be able to find out more about this mysterious note. With the trailers for Legend Z-A that we've got so far, there have been some concerns that have been voiced regarding the possibility of ride Pokemon in this game, similar to what we saw in Legend Z-A, and whether they're going to even be present at all. Obviously, we all want them, so we hope that they're there, but personally, I don't think there's much to worry about. While I don't know the extent to which ride Pokemon will be incorporated into this game, considering that X and Y were the very first games that introduced the modern ride Pokemon concept, and Go-Goat is basically the mascot of that concept in X and Y, and we were able to ride around on a Go-Goat in Lumiose City, I would be hard-pressed to believe that ride Pokemon will be completely absent from this game. I think they will definitely be present. It could be a little different to Legends Arceus, but I think they will definitely play a factor because it was a key part of what X and Y was as games, and I don't think they'll leave that behind. I've already mentioned the anime and how Legend Z-A and the anime could be paralleling one another. However, this could also be happening with the XYZ arc of the anime that premiered when X and Y were still the current games. The reason for this is because the XYZ arc is clearly a leftover from when Pokemon Z was going to be a thing back then. Therefore, with the anime often paralleling the games as we've said, the plot of the XYZ anime could have been somewhat accurate to what we were going to get in the games, and therefore at least some of those original ideas could influence the plot of ZA as well. So it's also possible we could see some parallels between the XYZ arc and the plot of Legend ZA. Something that is probably not going to have any real bearing on the game itself, but is still really interesting to note, is that if we look at the original Legends game, Legends Arceus, it was obviously a game that took place in the past. Then the game that followed that up was Scarlet and Violet, which took place in the present day and was all about time travel. And then the game that followed that up is obviously Pokemon Legends ZA, which is set in a more futuristic time, or at least it's more focused on the future, with the whole plot revolving around the redevelopment of Lumiose City. And this clearly shows an intentional connection and theme with these three games that essentially kind of makes them sort of a unofficial trilogy or trinity, which is really interesting in my personal opinion. This next one is very interesting and is definitely going to be worth keeping an eye on because it has to do with Colress possibly having a connection with Quasartico. This is because Colress and Quasartico's CEO, Jet, have a lot of visual similarities to one another with their designs, and they also essentially have the same exact goal of drawing out the true strength of Pokemon. And we also know, thanks to an NPC in X and Y, that Colress has actually been to the Kalos region before. So could this be coming full circle, and could we see an appearance by Colress in Legend Z-A as some kind of secret scientist or something like that for Quasartico? That would genuinely be amazing, but obviously we're just gonna have to wait and see. Something that I have pointed out previously, but it's definitely worth bringing up again, is that Looker's office can be seen in one of the trailers for this game, which hints that either Looker or Emma, or possibly both of them, could potentially appear in this game. Another concern going into Legend Z-A, and especially coming off of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, is whether we'll be able to go into buildings in this game, because Scarlet and Violet did not allow you to go into most of those games' buildings, which was a huge disappointment, and now we're getting a game in Legend Z-A that takes place within a city, so people have been wondering if we'll be able to even go into a lot of the buildings that we're seeing in this game. Well, I am happy to say that going into buildings is 100% going to be present, because we've already seen multiple indoor areas in just the few short trailers that we have gotten for this game that really haven't showed the vast majority of what this game has to offer. If you couple that with the fact that, at the very least, all of the major indoor locations in Lumiose from Pokemon X and Y are still going to be accessible because this is an enhanced Kalos experience, we can more or less say that this issue is not going to be an issue, and there should be a variety of indoor locations to take part in and explore in this game. I mentioned the likes of Trevor and Clement and Bonnie earlier, and whether they could appear in Legend Z-A, and another character to mention alongside them is Professor Sycamore. Sycamore is very likely to appear in Legend Z-A, not only because, like Trevor, Clement, and Bonnie, he also resides in Lumiose City, but also because of his significance within Pokemon X and Y as the Pokemon Professor of the Kalos region. It is yet to be seen if he will take up this same role in Legend Z-A, and it is possible that he might not be the professor for this specific game. If he is not, given the likelihood of him appearing in the first place, it's going to be very interesting to see what kind of role he could potentially have in this title. In a shot in one of the trailers where the player character is talking to AZ, his Eternal Flower Floette is next to the player character instead of AZ. This is a very small detail with a lot of speculation being put onto it, but could this potentially mean that AZ might be lending us his Floette to help out with our adventure in some way? Because you wouldn't really imagine, after all they've gone through, for Floette to be away from AZ in any capacity unless it was for a specific reason, like it helping us as the player to accomplish something, which seems like the kind of thing that could happen in this game. And another reason for that is because Eternal Flower Floette is most likely going to be obtainable in this game. It was obviously going to be an event Pokemon back in the day, but wasn't, so now that we're returning to all of this stuff, it is 100% going to be obtainable in some way, shape, or form. But with the backstory of Pokemon X and Y and the plot of X and Y itself in mind, AZ is not very likely to just give his Eternal Flower Floette away after taking taking 3,000 years to reunite with it. So with this dynamic in mind, what could it mean for AZ? Could he possibly die? Is there some huge plot twist waiting for us that basically forces him to give us his Eternal Flower Floette with no other option available? Or is it just going to be the case that we get gifted this Pokemon mystery gift style and it has no bearing on the plot whatsoever? That would suck, but it is a possibility, and overall, it's just going to be really interesting to see how this game handles this specific situation. As I mentioned earlier, Prism Tower does not have the gym iconography at its entrance that it had in the past in Pokemon X and Y. This could mean that it's no longer a gym, as I've also said before, and with it not being a gym, seemingly, that would have to mean that it's got some other important role to play instead, because it's still the single most iconic structure in the entire city, and therefore is going to have some kind of function, and if not a gym, what could that potentially be? I also mentioned earlier about how Pokemon Legends Z-A will probably be looking to tie up at least some of the loose ends that were from Pokemon X and Y, and one that I think is very likely to be addressed is the Ghost Girl. Not only because it's the single biggest mystery from Pokemon X and Y, and possibly all of Pokemon in general, but also because it specifically takes place, the Ghost Girl event, within Lumiose City. So I definitely feel like the Ghost Girl is going to make a reappearance or have some kind of significance in this game, and if she does, could she find the one that she was talking about? One particular idea that I've seen mentioned that is really interesting is the idea that the new protagonists of this game could be the one that she was looking for, because she mentions the previous protagonists in X and Y were not the one she was looking for. So that could be an interesting angle for this to go, but whatever ends up happening, I do feel like we are likely to get some advancement on the Ghost Girl mystery in this game. This next one is a pretty crazy one, but the reason why I'm mentioning it is because for as crazy as it is, it actually does feel like it has some legitimacy to it, and that is the idea that the player characters could potentially be the children of Professor Sycamore and your mother from Pokemon X and Y. This is because the male player character looks a ton like Professor Sycamore, and the female player character, while admittedly it's not as much of a resemblance, still does bear a resemblance to your mother from Pokemon X and Y. And maybe this is the answer to the question we asked before about what Sycamore might be up to in this game. A very interesting thing as it relates to the battles of this game is that when your Pokemon is Mega Evolved, there seems to be a very interesting symbol next to all of the moves of your Pokemon. It seems to look like a C+, and definitely looks like it has some kind of bearing or meaning to the moves that you're using while you're Mega Evolved, but it's impossible to say at this point what that C+ might actually do. Something else that we have seen in these trailers and has been confirmed at this point with the latest trailer is the fact that Pokemon will be able to follow you once again in Legends Z-A. This is starting to become more of a standard feature instead of like a special thing like it was a few years ago, so it's not the craziest reveal in the world, but it is very nice to see that it's back in this game, and it looks like it's going to be a lot of fun to use in the Lumiose City setting. Something that is fairly interesting that I noticed in the first gameplay trailer for this game is that what seems to possibly be the first battle with your rival in the game that takes place right outside of Hotel Z where you will be staying features both of your starter Pokemon at level 10. Now, if this is indeed the first rival battle, this could mean that your starter Pokemon are going to start out at level 10 in this game instead of level 5 like they always traditionally do, because we usually have rival battles at the beginning of Pokemon games where you battle your freshly obtained starter Pokemon prior to actually training it at all, and this is where it debuts at level 5. This seems to be like it could be that same exact scenario, except now our Pokemon are at level 10. If this is indeed what is actually happening here, this is a pretty significant shakeup, and it could significantly shake up the leveling and potentially even the difficulty of the rest of the game. Something I've been wondering about this game for a while now is who is giving us the starter Pokemon of this game, and how are the starters of this game? We got an explanation to this in Pokemon Legends Arceus, with Laventon being the person who gave us the starters, hence why they're different to the normal Sinnoh starters, and he gave us the option of choosing between these particular starters because he obtained them throughout his travels prior to ending up in Hisui. So there was an actual lore-based reason as to why we got the starters we did, and I just wonder what that lore explanation is going to be for these starters in this game, because there more than likely will be a similar sort of explanation. Some stuff that was newly revealed in the most recent trailer for the game has to do with the newly revealed Z-A Royale. This is sort of a tournament type thing where you get to progress your character from rank Z all the way up to rank A, battling a bunch of trainers throughout Lumiose City along the way. There is something within this Z-A Royale called ticket points, and you get ticket points by battling and defeating trainers. Once you obtain enough of these ticket points, you get a Challenger's ticket, which lets you participate in a promotion match that allows you the opportunity to up your rank if you win. There is also something along with this that was mentioned on the Z-A website called bonus cards. This is another way that you can earn ticket points, and they offer certain conditions that you must complete, like for example using a super effective move in a battle. If you satisfy these conditions, you will get additional points in addition to the ones that you get from battling other people, which is a really nice little layer to this whole system. Another big part of the Z-A Royale thing is that it all takes place during the nighttime. And a really interesting thing that has been revealed along with this is that the game's time sequence going from day to night actually passes by in real time. If you look at the minimap, you can actually see a time gauge that shows whether it's daytime or nighttime and how much time is left during that time of the day. So it seems like we're going to actually be able to experience the passing of day into night in a real-time sequence versus it just changing over with a loading screen or something like that, which is going to be amazing to experience. Another thing we see in this most recent trailer is that after showing off the whole ranked battle thing of the Z-A Royale and talking with the trainers upon ranking up, it shows a short clip of two Rotom phones kind of linking up with one another. This personally gave me the vibe of almost like in Gold and Silver, where we get to trade numbers with various trainers to potentially battle them again and call them and talk and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see if this little clip in this latest trailer could be foreshadowing that kind of feature or something similar. There is also yet another collectible that is present along with the ticket points and the Challenger's tickets in the Z-A Royale, and it is a coin-like collectible called a prize medal. I personally don't know if we know what this actually does at this point, but it is something that wasn't really specified or talked about in the trailer that I wanted to mention here. One thing that was mentioned, however, is that if you get to rank A in the Z-A Royale, you will get to have one wish granted. This is clearly a very distinct thing that is going to be important to the plot of the games, so it's going to be very interesting to see what our wish will be when we inevitably get to that A rank, and whether some people will try and sway what our wish is to accomplish their own goals. Or whether someone else will get to the A rank before us and potentially have their wish granted instead. So this is a very interesting dynamic that I think is going to make the story of this game all the more intriguing. And another intriguing thing along with that is the fact that Urbane and Tawny, our rivals, are also going to be competing in the Z-A Royale, and therefore they probably have something in mind with regards to what they would wish for if they got to the A rank, which we potentially might be able to learn about as part of the plot. Pokemon Legends Z-A has also been revealed as the very first main series Pokemon game to be rated higher than E for everyone, because it is actually rated E10+. Now, this doesn't exactly mean this is going to be a super mature Pokemon game or anything like that, but it is very interesting to see that it's gotten a rating higher than any other main series game to this point. And speaking even more of the rivals, it honestly just seems with everything we know about them so far that they are going to be very, very integral to the story and lore and plot of this game, because their shade of hair, which we talked about earlier as it related to the anime and Gibeon, it actually matches the color of the logo of Pokemon Z-A. Because as we can see in the Pokemon part of the logo, the color is kind of a white and it fades into a pink, which is exactly what is going on with the hair color of the rival characters. So this clearly is a very important detail if it's in the logo of the game itself, and that means the rivals are likely going to be very, very important to the plot and story of this game, which is going to be very interesting to see how that actually plays out. Another interesting thing that's worth pointing out about this game is that it seems like there's not going to be any abilities in this game. The Pokemon that have been confirmed for this game and are showcased on the Legends Z-A website have all the information specified about them, like their name, type, etc., but their abilities are not mentioned amongst all of these details, which indirectly pretty much confirms that this is not going to be a thing in this game, much like it was also not a thing in Legends Arceus, which I feel like is not a huge deal. I think people are kind of used to this by now, especially with it also happening in Legends Arceus, and also with the battle system being so exciting in its own right for this game, but it is obviously a big shakeup to the normal standard Pokemon experience. In the latest trailer that we got, we also saw something very interesting that was like a deliberate foreshadow cliffhanger type of thing. We saw this shot where the player character seems to be prepared to face off against some kind of mysterious thing that is off the screen that we don't actually get to see before it cuts away. But we do see that it's kind of glowing in this pink aura, which obviously means whatever is off to the side of the screen is very important and could be a number of things. It could be plot related, it could be a new Mega Pokemon, it could be a boss character that we have not got the chance to see yet. Whatever it is, it seems to be important, and it's going to be really interesting to see what this ends up actually becoming once we get to learn more. Another thing that I have personally noticed is that it looks like there are at least 8 different wild zones in Lumiose City, based on what we've seen so far. This could potentially not be the entire amount, there could be more, but also the fact that we have seen distinctly that there is at least 8 makes me wonder if this is kind of equating to like the gym system in normal Pokemon games, and these wild zones and then the battle zones in the Z-A Royale are effectively taking the place of the standard 8 gyms that we would normally travel between in a regular Pokemon game. A small detail that was also confirmed to be returning from Legends Arceus is the fact that crouching and sneaking has returned for this title. Again, that's a small thing, but given the more urban setting and the more modern day developed setting of this game, I personally was really glad to see this confirmed as coming back, because it's the kind of thing that I could have also seen as staying exclusive to a more primitive set game like Legends Arceus. And kind of going along with that, a crazy thing that has been confirmed about this game is that you can actually flee trainer battles, which is a very infamous thing that you have not been able to do in the entirety of Pokemon's existence. If you try in any Pokemon game, it always classically tells you that you cannot run, but in this game you can, which I honestly think is a pretty cool shakeup. It also seems like we've gotten the names of the player characters confirmed as well, as the latest trailer showed us that the male player character is named Paxton, while the female player character is named Harmony. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that these are for sure going to be these characters' final names, because in the past we have also seen beta names used for the player characters in official trailers, so it's kind of a wait and see type of situation, but these could still potentially be the names that they end up using in the final games. I previously mentioned the character of Zack a little earlier, who you battled in order to potentially up your rank in the Z-A Royale. Well, his trainer class seems to be that of a cab driver, and what's really interesting is that he actually has the Boltund logo that appears in Pokemon Sword and Shield on his jacket, which basically confirms the presence of Galar region related stuff in this game, and is a neat little crossover between regions from Kalos to Galar, and I personally hope we get to see more of this kind of stuff in the game as well. Another very interesting thing that might come out of this game is that we might actually be able to Mega Evolve our Pokemon outside of battle. There is a quick little moment in the most recent trailer where we can see the player character outside of a battle, but they still have the Mega Evolution gauge fully filled up and active as if it is able to be used. And there is even a button icon on the gauge indicating that it can be used. So this seems to actually imply that this might actually be the case, which would be amazing if true. And if that is actually the case, it probably means that we're going to need to Mega Evolve our Pokemon outside of battle for various quests and other specific situations, which honestly sounds amazing, so I personally really hope it turns out this way. And for our final detail, we have already seen Zygarde in a couple of different trailers for this game, but it's only appeared in its 10% form to this point, which is its lowest form other than just a Zygarde cell or core. Additionally, we have also seen individual cells wandering around too, which seems to potentially be implying that Zygarde is separated from the cells that it needs to become its 50% and eventually its complete form, and it very possibly could be one of the quests of us as the player character to find these cells for Zygarde as we are exploring Lumiose City in order to help Zygarde out maybe, or at the very least to advance the plot as we might be collecting the cells on behalf of someone else. So that's another very interesting detail that's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. That is just about all of the interesting, major, behind-the-scenes kind of details that I have noticed to this point, though, so I really hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, be sure to leave a like and let me know all your thoughts about this stuff in the comments below. I plan on continuing to cover the trailers and the game like this as well in the future as we get more trailers, so be sure to subscribe as well if you haven't already, and stay tuned for more, and with that said, I'll be back with another new video very soon. Thanks again so much for watching this one. I really appreciate it, and until then, as always, I will smell you guys later.